You're listening to Startup Universe Talks, a podcast where we meet with startup founders, angel investors, and major stakeholders of the startup ecosystem. They let us in on the do's and don'ts of running a startup, their career story, and the process of succeeding as well as failing. In other words, everything of interest to startup nerds. Startup Universe is a massive network of opportunities for EU tech startup founders, connecting them with the best minds of the EU tech community, with unicorn founders, known investors, and experts. We have brought together European countries to join forces and launch startup programs suitable for their nation's tech founders. ESU aims to give access to opportunity for funding and expansion across EU countries. This is Startup Universe Talks. I'm Maritza, and today I am here with Gorjan Jovanovski, the co-founder of AirCare. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invite.
So, can you begin by telling me about AirCare?
About AirCare. Okay, let's go from the beginning. I am a software engineer by trade and an eco-activist by heart. I try to use technology to hopefully make a better impact on the world around us. And that's always been kind of my passion since I was a kid. I started programming when I was very young and taught myself how to code. And this is where AirCare came in. We can probably go later back into the history of AirCare if you wish so. But AirCare now is a mobile app, a very simple and intuitive to use mobile app that tracks air quality. Hopefully all around the world soon, in 45 countries now, and helps you know exactly what you breathe. We try to use open air quality data. We aggregate it into a very simple and understandable format so that you don't have to be a scientist or an academic to understand what is the quality of air that you are breathing.
Okay, the idea, how was it born? I mean, of course it is something very important and talked about, air pollution, but how did it occur to you?
Well, exactly why you said it, because it is important, but was not talked about. In Skopje here, where I was studying at the time, this was 2014, I think. I was a software engineer student at the local university. It was winter, and I was trying to teach myself how to make mobile apps. We didn't have a course then, so I would use YouTube. Of course, there's always a video, somebody on YouTube that'll teach you anything in the world. So I just used YouTube to look up some videos on how to make mobile apps. But I did not want to make an app that would just say, I don't know, hi, my name is Gorjan, and that's about it. What I did was I tracked down some interesting information that I could possibly display in the app. It was winter at that point. And when I opened the Ministry of Environment's website that reports on air quality, and I looked at the numbers there and I kind of downloaded and tried to understand them, I was shocked by the amount of air pollution that we had. I thought I was interpreting them wrong because at some point it was saying that cities like Tetovo, which is a nearby city to my home city of Skopje, was polluted 20 times over EU limits, which of course I could not believe. I'm like, how can it be 20 times over the safe limit that the EU has placed? And after realizing that these numbers were not wrong, and what we used to call outdoors the smelly fog was actually smog, I decided to try and put these numbers into an understandable format and get people to talk about air pollution. So one thing led to another, but this is kind of where it all originated from.
Yeah, so you really managed to get people talking, because when you launched AirCare, it caused a public outrage in Serbia and North Macedonia of people just protesting and being so upset that the air was that polluted. How did you feel when something that you had created caused such a big public response?
That wasn't kind of the initial goal. Wasn't that I wasn't aware that it would spread as far and as wide as it did, and it would have an impact as it did. The idea was more for me and maybe my friends on social media that would see the post that I would make about the app, to maybe download it, see how it works, and so on. But after local media started catching wind of the app and started promoting the app, doing interviews. And again, me as a complete noob at the time, not really understanding how to even promote the app or talk about the issue because it was new to me as much as it was new to anybody else. Saw the potential that it had and how many people were now shocked to understand how bad the air pollution is. Because maybe at that point you would say people were aware that there was air pollution. Sure, the concept was there. But once you tell someone it's 20 times over the limit, suddenly your mind starts flashing these red lights. Like, okay, wait, this is really bad now. It's no longer something I can just say, it's part of life. But this is a serious problem. So after seeing that, I think it took a couple of months to really gain traction here in North Macedonia. A lot of people started talking about it, posting it on social media, and we had the first big protests going out on the streets. So ever since, we realized that we could use technology to help people fight for a better future. And that's kind of the motto of AirCare going forward.
Yeah, that's great. You must have been so proud, or what were you feeling?
Proud, yes. Shocked a lot, because it was, again, not planned or expected that it would go viral as it did. But I think that at that point, I understood that I had the obligation to continue the project and to make sure that people constantly knew what they were breathing. So to improve on it, to add more data to it, because it was a fight that I think is worth fighting. I know is worth fighting. It's not something that should be up for debate, if you ask me. So I felt it's my obligation and my moral duty to continue working with AirCare and making sure that not only my citizens, but the citizens of any country that is facing this sometimes invisible, sometimes visible enemy know what they breathe.
AirCare has grown a lot over the years. How have you been navigating the expansion of the app?
It's been good, but it again comes to the fact to show that sometimes it helps if you have a little luck in expanding. AirCare started in North Macedonia with 19 measuring stations from the government, which would provide data to the app every hour on the hour. Some volunteer networks started popping up with volunteer measuring stations, let's call them less accurate, but a lot cheaper than the government ones that people could install in their homes. So it started to scale within the country once people started talking about this, because 19 measuring stations cannot cover a whole country, cannot cover a city, let alone a whole country. And then we decided that we want to go to our first new market and expand after years and years. I think we were very late because I was treating it as a pet project for my country, but then I realized it's not only us that's facing this issue. So we looked at Serbia, next door neighbors, similar culture, similar market, could be easy to enter the market, and facing a very similar foe. I think everybody on the Balkans and Eastern Europe in general has this issue. So we decided to expand to Serbia, and we had the exact same effect because we expanded with the help of local established non-governmental organizations, local established eco movements. We were able to reach a lot of people without resorting to classic marketing, to classic, sponsorships and things like that. We spent $0 on marketing, and so far have spent, I think, this is the first week we're actually running our first major campaign in 7 years. We've spent roughly maybe $200 all in all in these 7 years on marketing to go where we are, because we tried to use different tactics to scale that did not involve having to pay someone to promote your app. We realized that AirCare as a tool helps these eco-organizations get their message across a lot stronger to people, which may have not been able to understand the dire situation of the air quality. For the people, it's a win because they get informed. For us, it's a win because we get more users. So it was basically a win-win-win situation without having to spend a dime on marketing.
That's very fascinating and pretty unique, and maybe it tells a lot about the actual product, that you didn't need to market it that heavily because it was such a needed thing, that it was already a big demand on it on the market. So then it just did the job by itself.
Totally. It did a lot. And it sometimes really depends on the timing. And this goes, I think, for any type of startup. For example, we were in Europe for probably a year, And I was kind of afraid to expand to the US. I was afraid from a technical perspective. The US had a lot of measurement stations, and I was worried that the technology stack of the app might break under the pressure of so much data coming in. So every couple of days, we would get an email from a user saying, I can't find the US on your app. Where's the US? And we would respond like, we are planning on adding it in the near future. But there was a day when I got 3 emails by 3 different people saying the same thing. And I decided, you know what, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should just launch the US, see what happens. If it breaks, we'll fix it. Delaying it indefinitely does not solve the problem. So we launch in the US completely unaware about the situation there. We just say, okay, we're adding all of these US answers. Within 2 weeks, the app had over 200,000 new users from the US. And I'm sitting there looking at the numbers, completely baffled by how did this happen? I was looking online. Did we find did a news outlet pick us up? Did a website talk about us? Nobody. It was like, how did a small startup from a Balkan country manage to get so many users by accident? What happened was, and we remember this as a fun story, but also as a very important learning point. The US had a group of measuring stations that you could purchase and put out called Purple Air. Great stuff that these guys are doing in the US. And they had a website, but they did not have a mobile app. Now, AirCare uses open data from a lot of these networks, including Purple Air. And on our app, we have on the webpage listing, we have Purple Air listed as one of the sources. So what happened was people were going on the App Store and on the Android Play Store, and they were searching for Purple Air, and we were popping up because we had that in the description because we use their data. And suddenly, again, by complete coincidence, we were able to spend $0 on marketing to be able to get a lot more of these users in, just because there was a need in the market that was not being met by having or not having a mobile app that would display this data. So scaling is very interesting. And it requires a lot of time and effort, but sometimes a little luck on your side can help push you along.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So that this new role to you as a startup founder, how did you feel like you grew into the role? Because you're an engineer to begin with, and you didn't have the experience being a startup founder before, as far as
No, not at all. It was very interesting because I used to work for 4 years before I dedicated myself to AirCare. I used to work at Booking.com in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. Great experience, great company to work for. I learned a lot from both managerial perspective and running my own product within the company. But I realized that I wanted to work on a product that was my own. I wanted to focus on building something that would have a strong impact on the world we live in from an ecological perspective, and realized that AirCare was sitting there all along as my side project, which I was working on after work. That was kind of the thing I wanted to dedicate my time to. So I decided, you know what, screw it. I quit my job, moved back, and decided to focus full-time on this. Let's see if we can make it from a side project into a social entrepreneurship business. It took a lot of learning. As a software engineer, I will make your website look amazing. I will make your app function great. But how do I run a business? What do you do with all of these things that need to be done? And this is where startup accelerators came along and really helped us out. There's a startup accelerator here in Skopje called Sivus. These were the guys that first picked us up, helped us through an acceleration program, introduced us to a lot of mentors, a lot of business things that we were lacking, marketing, sales, anything that as an engineer, we would not know as a team. First of all, myself, and then as the team grew. So it was very crucial to get involved within these types of communities, within these types of startup programs that helped us fill in the gaps of missing knowledge. And I'm still learning, by the way. I'm far from done. We're still learning, but they were amazing help along the way.
Okay. Was there a particular advice or sort of guidance that helped you more than something else?
Oh, there was one that really still sticks in my mind, and it was kind of a wake-up call. A slap on the face in a way. We started fundraising. We started looking for investors, and we ended up being accepted into the Accelerate 2030 program, which is an amazing, again, program of impact startups from around the world. We were only one out of, I think, 15 or 20 startups representing not only North Macedonia, but whole Europe. And we were able to join this program in Geneva. Now, we were in Geneva through this program, and we were talking with possible investors there. And they asked us, how much are you looking for? Now, as startup founders, we come from the Balkans, and the Balkans are not known for their enormous wealth and money. Of course, we're let's say in a lower standard here, and hence our requirements of what we thought our startup is worth were quite low. And when we communicated this to the investors in Geneva, and of course Switzerland, very rich country, they kind of laughed at us a little bit, and they said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Why? Well, what is this valuation you've put on your startup? It's ridiculous." But I said, "This is what local investors usually put in to the startup." Like, yes, maybe that's what local investors do, and if you're targeting local investors, sure. But you're looking to expand globally. You should be looking at the big fish. Don't undervalue yourself just because you come from a market which maybe isn't that known for startups or isn't that financially, let's call it, big on investment. With especially technology startups, it's not very easy, but let's say it's easier to talk to international investors and get investment from countries which don't have the limits of your own. So it kind of gave us a wake-up call, made us realize that the value that AirCare was bringing as a company now was much higher than what we were initially placing it at. Especially as a tech startup, doesn't matter if you come from a small or a big country. Maybe you'll have an easier time talking to investors and finding investors if you're coming from a big country within your country. But thanks to the wonders of the internet, you could communicate with any investor all around the world. And if they like what you see, they will help invest in your company, probably by standards of their own country and not of yours. Meaning that you can value your startups much higher if you look for investors, and you're at a point to look for investors on the global scale. That doesn't mean you should be ignoring local investors. Local investors are very important, especially maybe for the first round or pre-seed or seed funding, to really help you get off your feet. But if you come from a country where that capital is probably limited, then looking abroad will really, really help expand your horizon on what your startup can do from a financing perspective.
I think that's great advice for the people in the Balkan countries, but also as well in the bigger ecosystems, which is the case for a lot of European countries.
Exactly.
So what is your top 3 advice for startup founders? Now you're given one really great advice, but have you the other go-to advice?
Let's see. First of all, one thing is that, and very recently we started joking about this here locally, and especially within AirCare. Being a startup founder is not the sexy thing we see on Instagram. It's really not. They've blown it out of proportion. Like, that's great. Maybe after you've made your first couple billion, and then you'll go on your yacht and say, "I'm a founder, but I'm sit on my yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean." It's usually not like that. It's a lot of work. It's very hard work, and you need to mentally prepare for that. Because if you jump within the founder role thinking that it's going to be all butterflies and rainbows, it's not. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's great, but you have to be ready to put in 110% of yourself. We joke that I didn't want to work 9 to 5. Now I work 24/7. It's very real. It's a reality of a founder. But then if you look at it from a different perspective, and that's kind of my third point that comes around, because I'm doing what I love, I don't consider it work. Cheesy as it may be, classy as it may be, it's true. If you were to wake me up towards the end of my previous job, if you were to wake me up at 3 in the morning and tell me, "Go to your job," I would have hated it. I would have really, I'm trying to sleep. But if you wake me up in the morning and say, "Do something for AirCare, you need to code something for AirCare," I'll do it immediately. And I love it. And that's why, even though I'm working maybe 24/7, you don't really feel it as work. It's part of my life now. And to a certain degree, it's just very beautiful that you get to spend your time doing something you love. It no longer feels like work. And it's a beautiful thing working for yourself as well. It's your own product. It's your own group of people. You get to shape the future of it going forward. So in my opinion, especially if you're younger, you have nothing to lose. I'm talking about to all of those that don't maybe have a family yet, don't have kids, don't have a mortgage. It's much easier to fail in a younger environment than it is when you probably have a family to take care of or a mortgage to pay. Then you want to be a bit more strategic with your advances. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing startups at all. So try. Especially if you want to do something, if you have passion to do a type of startup, try, because otherwise you might live the rest of your life thinking, what if I would have done that? This way you'll know. The corporate world isn't going anywhere. The private sector isn't going anywhere. If your startup fails, you'll try another startup, or you just go back to a 9-to-5 job. It's not a problem. It's not going anywhere. But if you don't try, you might live the rest of your life just thinking, well, what if?
I feel like that is the perfect note to end it on. Just go for it. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm glad to share a little bit of AirCare's experience, and then I invite anyone who wants to know what they breathe, check out the app, AirCare, and tell us what you think. We'd love to hear your feedback.
You've been listening to Startup Universe Talks. If you want to know more about us, go to thestartupuniverse.org and follow us on social media. Thank you for listening.